Welcome back, everyone. I cannot believe how fast these 2 days have passed. It has been an incredible time of learning, stretching, challenging each other. I have been monitoring throughout this process the conversations that's been taking place in our Facebook group, and there's been some encouraging and challenging statements being made, questions being asked, and frankly, I am humbled by how engaged you all have been. There have been incredible questions that I know I can't answer today for you, but I think important questions that need an answer, that demands a response. And I pray that as we play out what happens next, not play it out, but move forward with the next steps following this summit, that you will find that the responses to your specific questions are being addressed. They may not be addressed in the ways that you would imagine, or maybe even the way you would do it, but to understand that we all are committed to seeing that we move forward together towards diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism in the Salvation Army here in the Central Territory and beyond. And so if we can do anything, and if this summit hasn't been about anything else, it has been an open process, a transparent process that has enabled us to have this kind of conversation and to address issues and topics that, frankly, so much information and rhetoric have gone out that we're not always sure what to believe, what is true, what is gospel, and what is, frankly, man's ideas, not God's ideas. So as we are nearing the end of the summit, but hopefully not the end of our conversation about social justice, about racial justice, I just want to thank you for your support and the support of the territorial leadership. And particularly, I want to take this moment before I forget to take this time to thank the folks that have been behind the scenes, behind the camera, making all this happen. This could not happen without the exceptional cooperation and talent of our visual communications team. So Sophia, David, Eric, Emmett, and I know I'm going to forget some names. Know that we really have appreciated all that you have done to make this happen. And so, again, we are in the final stretch of our summit, and I want to affirm that it has not gone unnoticed, the number of you who have signed on throughout the course of these 2 days. Clearly, there are many Salvationists, and not just in the Central Territory, who are concerned about issues of racism and are wanting guidance from Army leadership with respect to what should be the Salvationist response to racism and racial injustice. While the Salvation Army International Position Statement on Racism provides us as Salvationists a clear and unequivocal statement against racism, such as the statement where it reads, "The Salvation Army is committed to fight against racism wherever it is experienced and will speak into societies around the world wherever we encounter it." The framers of this positional statement leaves it up to every territory to develop its own strategies to address racism in the specific context and/or country in which we find ourselves in. The International Position Statement also quite unequivocally affirms a number of other statements that I think is important to bring to your memory. If you've read this statement before, if you have not, I would say go on to and Google the Salvation Army International Position Statement. There are about 17 or 18 of them, but read specifically the one that is written on racism. It affirms that the Salvation Army will make and encourage effort to challenge and overcome racism wherever it exists. It also says the Salvation Army must always be vigilant and guard against the infiltration of racism in our organization. It says that the Salvation Army recognizes the importance of robust systems to report and discuss racism without fear and will endeavor to provide these. In a moment, you're going to hear from Lieutenant Colonel Lionel Richardson, our very first Territorial Diversity and Inclusion Secretary. And while this is not solely his role to be the recipients of complaints about racism, know that we have begun to have a system in place that will enable us to do just what our international position statement says. When it says that we will create robust systems to report and discuss racism without fear. Because I know that has been some of our experience, where whether we recognize something as racism or sexism or whatever ism there might be, where do I go? Who do I tell? I don't want to be further marginalized or even pushed out because I dare to stand up and say something. There should never be that within the Church of God, and certainly within the Salvation Army. Our position statement also affirms that we will take personal action against racism motivated by disobedience to the example of Jesus, and that we will respect the image of God in every person. And I pray that if you've heard nothing else in these past couple of days, that you have heard us affirm the image of God in all people, that indeed we all were created with this image, with this spark of God, and how He loves us all equally. And therefore we should love and respond to each other in the same way. Thus, the way forward toward greater diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism will only happen if a strong and decisive course of action is carved out and taken by each and every one of us. As we heard in the talk back, this is all our job. It's all hands on deck now. This is not Commissioner Bailey's job or Colonels Lionel and Patty's job. This isn't just my job as the Social Justice and Urban Missions Secretary. It's all our job, from top to bottom and from bottom back up to top. And so for the next few minutes, I want to review with you the expectations again we have for how we will indeed move forward together. To assist the Central Territory in moving forward together towards diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism, a moving forward planning document has been created to aid each of us, to each division, to develop their own plan for how it will do its part to move forward on the issues of diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism. The Racial Justice Summit, this was just the launching point. This was the place where we get to dialogue, not monologue, but dialogue around the issues of racism, and with a view toward, okay, it's go time now. What are we going to do about it? There was a lot of energy and momentum back in early June when I saw Salvationists all across the country, but particularly here in the Midwest, respond to the wrongful killing of George Floyd, and how people had taken the time to educate themselves and to learn more about, frankly, history of Black people that had never been shared before. It wasn't shared in school, so people were learning about Juneteenth and the disaster that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's still more learning that we need to do. But I don't say it's never time to study. I'm all about the study. But at some point, we got to get moving. And so that's why I've called this document the Moving Forward Divisional Plan, because we will move forward. I may not have specific authority to keep you going, but know that God made me scrappy for a reason. And so I will be reaching out to you and following up to you as I lay out what the expectations are for each of the division, operating, of course, under the direction of my good leader, Commissioner Brad Bailey, and Commissioner Heidi Bailey, and the leadership of the Richardsons as well. So if you don't want to see this, get your plans in when they're expected. And so, just to review, our theme for the Racial Justice Summit affirmed we can do better, and that we will do with folks like you who have taken time out of their way, their very busy schedule, to listen and learn about this complex issue. It's my hope that you have been stirred up and spurred on to consider how God is calling you to leverage the current moment for justice. As you know, I currently serve as the Social Justice and Urban Mission Secretary, and it has been my task to develop the concept and the vision for our Center for Social Justice and Urban Mission. And what began to surface as I began to delve into what is God saying about justice in our Central Territory and for the Salvation Army, what began to surface was a sense that God wants to raise up a network of thousands of social justice champions across the territory and beyond who have been equipped and empowered to step into issues that are an affront to God's character and his mandate for justice. That's a mandate. That's not a suggestion for us. God expects us to amplify and lift up and be champions for justice. And so let's review what I mean by what's next. Some slides are about to come up, and we are going to, at this point, review what I mean by, what we mean by what's next. So next slide, please. So this plan reaffirms that the Racial Justice Summit goal, is that this indeed, again, is not man's idea. This truly was led by the Spirit. From the moment we heard of the killing of George Floyd to the moment when we came back from Minneapolis, there's this movement, I believe, in the Spirit within our leadership, within our soldiery, that said something needs to happen. We can't just let this be a one-off, feel-good, one of those Salvation Army smile and here's some free bread kind of thing. And so we will move forward together towards diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism in the Salvation Army Central Territory. We declared this on Monday. We declare this again at the end of the summit. And we will be declaring this for months, perhaps years to come. Next slide, please. I won't go over the 6, you got to see 3 there, but the 6 outcomes, I've asked you and encouraged you to review them. I saw people reposting them on Facebook, so I know you know what we expect to come out of this. And we knew that these 2 days was not going to achieve those 6 outcomes, many of whom are aspirational goals as well. But we've made some definitive, declarative statements, and now, like I said, it's go time. It's action time. And so, by Friday of this week, you will be receiving divisional commanders from across the territory, the Moving Forward Plan, with a view toward you developing a task force, ad hoc committee, whatever way you want to structure it, where folks are going to be brought together, a team of folks, and minimally the original 2 or so delegates that was originally identified to come and be a part of the live delegation. It's my hope that those individuals in the respective divisions in which they were to hail from would be part of leading the charge for moving forward. And so you will receive a document that looks a little like this. Oh, they got it on the screen. That only begins to outline what I'm expecting. It's going to ask you to identify your members of the team. I'm asking you to, right out front, identify someone to chair. We're not going to dictate who's going to be that person to lead the charge, but clearly it needs to be somebody who takes this seriously, who feels a burden for racial justice, much as I do, and maybe not the same way in which I do, But so that doesn't mean it has to be someone of color, but it has to be someone who is spirit-filled. I think about when Marion shared about what was going on in the early Christian church with the Hellenistic Jews, and how, with some godly wrestling with the issue, that they identified people, Stephen and Nicanor and some of the other, what became the early deacons, the first deacons of the church, to lead the charge, to ensure that the folks were being taken care of that were previously on the margin and not being well cared for by the church. And so likewise, I have an expectation, we have an expectation, I hope you embrace this expectation, that you will identify a committee, a group of folks who are filled with the Spirit, who knows God's word, who is prayerful, and are the ones who seek his guidance. Because if we're not led by the Spirit, this too will fail, like many other initiatives that we have had that have gone to the wayside, because they weren't possibly prayed over and were really coming at the direction of God. I feel strongly that this is coming from the direction of God. I believe this is our revival moment here. Someone said to me today that, when we say revival, we think about some, big, large movement, but sometimes it may be small little things that ushers in revival. And for me, I think this is our revival moment. And to the extent that we get this right, there will be, much like the early Christian church, the word of God will spread. The church will grow. And so please take this plan and the putting together of your group seriously, because I dare say our church depends on it. The survival of our church depends on this. And I'm just saying denominationally, because God will, like you say, the rocks may have to cry out, but his word will go forth with or without us in the Salvation Army. So you'll have the plan. Is going to come under the cover of our esteemed colleague, Colonel Lanier Richardson and Colonel Patty Richardson, with further instructions on how this is to flow out. In the cover letter for the moving forward plan, it will lay out some specific dates. I'm mindful that we're moving into Christmas, and so there are only 2 or so things you need to do right before Christmas really fully kicks off. One of which is to distribute this for me to distribute this moving forward plan to you by November 1st. And then by November 15th, I would like to have back from you the name of your members, including who's going to lead the charge, because that's the person I'm going to be reaching out to. And then you have until January 31st. This is not to be some long, drawn-out process. You've got from now, basically November 1st or 15th or so, to the very end of January. How you accomplish putting together your plan, again, I leave that to you. It could be done over the course of a weekend where you all come together and wrestle and contend with the issues going on with respect to racial justice, and then begin to get to work to boom, 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 laying out what you believe will help move you forward. So you'll be developing action plans and steps. And then by February 14th, you're going to hear back from us. We're going to review those plans and basically say, yes, great start, move forward. Others, it may be, I think you can dig deeper. You can go deeper with this. And we will work with you. And then the goal is that really this is for fiscal year 21. And so then implementation of the very goals that you set for yourselves, the action plans, the activities, we're going to be looking at, you have from March 1st on to September 30th. And so this is the plan. I pray again that you take this seriously, because we take this seriously here. I know there are those of you sitting in division, whether it's Corps officers, your soldiers, people in your community, folks are counting on us to deal with the issues within so that we can better serve the people God so dearly loves, particularly those who are poor, needy, the aliens in our midst, the more marginalized, the very vulnerable. And so I thank you for giving me this time, your time, for these past 2 days. And now I bring to you, ask that you receive Colonel Richardson, who have a few closing words to share with you and to further challenge you and spur you on. So thank you.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful conference, and I want to tell you why, and as a territory, how we move forward. I recall being a new divisional leader in Midland Division. There were several things that happened, but two really stands out as a divisional leader. One was the night that we heard the tornado hit Joplin, Missouri. And it was a devastating tornado with over 160 some odd individuals who lost their lives, probably even more that was unaccounted for. And I remember coordinating what the Army would do and how we would respond. And the next day, driving to Joplin. And something, as we got closer to Joplin, I started noticing, and that was cars going the opposite direction, leaving Joplin. Families with their belongings packed up who were leaving the city because their homes had been destroyed or their way of life was gone, and so they were looking for someplace else to go. But the Salvation Army, and I remember a highway patrolman passing me, and we were in the Salvation Army van with the disaster logo on the side, and he pointed, he said, "Get behind me." And I think we were going like 90 miles an hour to Joplin, because there were people waiting on us to respond. And he said, "You are the Salvation Army. And so we need you there on the ground." And when we got to Joplin, there was never any doubt that the Salvation Army would not be responding because there were people in need. I remember also being in a meeting with the mayor of Joplin, who had been elected only a few months prior to that devastating event taking place. And this particular man was just shell-shocked. Actually, he was almost afraid to go out on stage. And I remember behind, as we gathered together before he went out, and him saying, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do when a third of your city is destroyed. How do you rebound from something like this?" And he was actually in tears. And I remember holding his hand and saying, "We will get through this together. The Salvation Army will be here with you." And we prayed with him, just as we had done with many families who had lost everything and family members in Joplin. There was no doubt of how the Salvation Army will respond in a horrific accident like this. We had done it many times before. The Salvation Army shows up and we provide for people. We don't just provide food and shelter and those things. One of the most important things we provide for individuals in times like that is hope. Hope for people who at that moment feel hopeless. There was another occasion as a divisional commander that I also encountered in Midland. It was the death of Michael Brown. And I remember on Sunday evening watching on television as things began to take place, and all of a sudden the crowd gathered and the body of Michael Brown still lying in the streets. And it was remnants of me growing up as a child in Memphis, Tennessee, of what happened there. But this time there had been no training for Salvation Army officers to respond to a community that was on the edge like Ferguson, Missouri was during the next few weeks and days. How, as a divisional leader, do you respond? There were people hurting. There were people who were without hope. But I had not went to EDS classes to tell me how do I respond to that type of hurt and pain. There was also a community of Christian leaders that were gathering and talking and praying for our community and praying for those who were involved. And I knew as a Salvation Army representative and part of the Christian community, and our mission statement said we are part of the universal church, that I needed to be there. But how was I to respond as a Salvation Army officer? I went, and oftentimes all I did was listen. listen to the pain of what had been taking place in this community. I also did what the Salvation Army does in times like this. We provided food for individuals who had been out of work in that community when curfew and other things that was imposed upon that community for safety but affected that community. And so the Salvation Army in 3 days provided over $125,000 worth of direct assistance to individuals. We also helped the police department and those who were there as well by providing water and the things that we normally do for that group. The Salvation Army, I found, had this unique ability to be accepted in both groups. Now, we had soldiers and we had others who wanted to march and we wanted to do other things. I said, but this is not who I believe we as the Salvation Army are. We were a part of the Christian community. As a Salvation Army representative, there were days that I was on phone calls with Washington, D.C., with Justice Department talking about the church's response to the community. And I remember as the names was read, how proud to be not Neil, but to be a Salvation Army representative, say we care about this community. We care about what is happening here. We care about how we're being portrayed around the world. We care about the hopelessness that people find themselves in. And as a Salvation Army, we want to do something about that. Well, Christmas came, and we also helped individuals with Christmas assistance as well. And I always remember, and I've told this story many times because it had a profound effect on me. We were giving out Christmas gifts to children who had been affected in Ferguson by the rioting and all that had taken place. And I remember this little girl, about 6 years old, came with her mother, and we gave her this pink and white bicycle. And as the Salvation Army, we were very proud. We gave her a bicycle. You know, this great Christmas gift any child would deserve. And I remember that night I went to bed and I could not sleep. Over and over, I heard the voice of God saying, Neil, what else are you going to do? It's like, we have done what the Army always does. And it was like the Spirit of God saying, but Neil, this child doesn't even have a place of safety to ride that bicycle. What are you going to do? And I remember praying and saying, God, I don't know what to do. I wish that we would have had a conference like this to help prepare me as a divisional leader of knowing how to respond. And I remember almost like the next day on television, there was this announcement that a piece of property, it was actually the very first piece of property that burnt to the ground during the rioting in Ferguson, was being donated to the Urban League. And I knew because of my community interactions with the community, the director of the Urban League, and they were going to build this office in Ferguson at this first place as kind of a memorial, but also a sign of hope for the community. And I called and asked, could we have lunch together? And I asked him, I said, if the Salvation Army came alongside of you, could we build something to respond to what we have seen and witnessed over the last few months here in Ferguson? And he said, what a great idea. Imagine the Salvation Army not just being part of delivering food and toys, but a part of restoring a community. That is what God called us to be. A restorer of hope, not just for Christmas Day, but for after Christmas. This is what I believe our territorial leaders want and desire us to be. A provider of hope beyond Christmas and beyond the food box. We didn't ask for what is happening around us. Once again, I found myself in Minneapolis in a similar situation with Orlando Castile, and later on, flat on my back in the hospital when George Floyd was killed. It seems that the Salvation Army, and as a leader, we have found ourselves to be there, and not responding to me, I feel, would not be living up to my calling as a Salvation Army officer. But it is also very important that we respond in the right and proper way. That we respond in a way that brings hope and dignity to the people we're responding on behalf to. That we remember our calling as Salvationists to bring about this unity of community and people around a common goal and a common hope, just as we do in emergency disasters. Today, our disasters are communities without hope. Today, our disasters are issues of social justice. Today, our disasters are more complicated, and some of them have been long-standing and long-running, more so than a tornado in 30 minutes that destroys a city. Many of them have been disasters. I know as a 60-something-year-old black African-American man, I've dealt with most of my life. But I have not lost hope, because I believe that God has an army. And the heart of the people in God's army is being turned toward this problem. In coming together as a community, the heart of our divisional as well as our territorial leaders are that we be a part of community in a new and fresh way. We've already started the process. Over 3 years ago, as the territorial leaders laid out this plan for us, not just to measure steps of going into communities and being involved, but steps while we're engaged in community, that we are come alongside of those in community, providing hope and resurrection that Jesus Christ gives to each one of us. In our divisional leadership, we have seen diversity of officers responding in communities. So when the next Ferguson happens or the next Minneapolis happens, that we have officers, a part of those teams who can help guide divisional and territorial leaders in a correct response, because some feel and know the pain. And so these last few days have been good for me, and hopefully for you as well, as we learn how to respond in a way that honors the one who died on the cross for our response, the one who came and who was rejected, who died and who rose again to give us power not just to be the Salvation Army, the number 1 or 2 or 3 brand in the world, but to be a shield of hope for those who are hopeless. And so I hope you will listen to the words of our territorial leader as he coalesces us around this goal of responding with human kindness and understanding to difficult problems that we continue to face as a country.
It's time to take a breath. It's time to take a deep breath. We've been together for 2 days. We have heard things, many of us, that we've never heard before. Sadly, for many of us, also, we have heard things that we have heard before. And we found ourselves in a place where perhaps we have found ourselves before. So what will make the difference today? Some things have scared us to death. Some things have motivated us to move forward. Such a powerful word from Colonel Richardson. The Apostle Paul, addressing the Corinthian church, writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3, says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and God of all encouragement." Encouragement is what we have attempted to bring to you during these days. Even in the midst of courageous conversation, it's important to find courage. And I want, before I continue on, to present to you 2 people who have quite a bit to do with the background of what we've received during these days, who have been responsible to present and prepare and manage and coordinate, along with Catherine, a set of workshops and opportunities from which we could gather encouragement. And so before I go on, I just want to present to you folks that you would know from many years ago in the territory who have come back to the territory. Lieutenant Colonels, I still have to remember that, Lieutenant Colonels John and Barbara Rich, program secretaries for the USA Central Territory. They have worked diligently and very hard on these 2 days. You would know that some of what's happened through COVID and other things have gone by the wayside that have largely to do with program, and yet they have saluted and they've moved forward and they have encouraged us on this path. So I just want to say publicly and virtually, thank you, John, thank you, Barbara, for your leadership and for the opportunities that you have given us all to sit around this table and to participate in hard conversations and figure out the way forward for all of us in a way that would honor God best. God bless you and thank you very much. Thank you. Dear brothers and sisters, I'm more convinced than ever that in our journey towards ongoing conciliation, racial justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, that encompasses standing alongside those most affected by racism in ways that represents the all-encompassing reality of the kingdom of God, that if we don't get compassion right, we won't get mercy right. Now, reorganizing ourselves, our processes, our structures, even our communities to give new life demands more than the creation of specialized appointments, territorial summits, task forces, standing committees, commissions. That's the easy part. To be truly life-giving will require a renewed consecration to love, to live, to engage, to serve, to lead, to come in relationship with an authentic compassion fueled by the example and the Spirit of the living Lord. We cannot forget that. Authentic compassion is the internal response experienced deep down in the soul of the one who witnesses that which breaks the Father's heart. And we've all experienced that throughout these days. It's the deepest of expressions that describe the very intimate love of God for man, even when we turn away from Him. Our acts of mercy, love in action, like serving suffering humanity in His name without discrimination, must flow from a heart of compassion for it to be genuine and God-honoring. Without compassion, it's impossible to be merciful in ways that would please the Father. It's more than just the right attitude, more than just the right feeling of bad or sorry. It's unleashing God's incomprehensible, relentless, and unconditional compassion through everything that we say, do, and decide. Without compassion, everything that we dare do in terms of acts of mercy are just Band-Aids. It should always be what tempers our reactions, guides our approach, directs our words, and motivates God-honoring actions and support, and on behalf of the other. Unadulterated compassion is a rocket fuel for our acts of mercy, in our acts of justice. In Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37, we have the fabled and familiar story of the Good Samaritan. Now, while we sometimes think of it as a Sunday school story and we leave it there, it is, in fact, one of the most powerful stories in the Scriptures, as Jesus uses this story to define and break down the essence of the will of God and defines what compassion is really all about. Now listen to the words again. You know them very well, but just listen to them. Let them penetrate your soul wherever you may be today. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. Then Jesus says, do this and you will live. Now, would you permit me to be so bold as to share the concept that we are to love our neighbor with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our strength, with all our mind? That is, in part, how we love ourselves, isn't it? Can we do that? Can we love our neighbors not only like, but as much as we love ourselves? Where we sit within this Jesus story will depend on how we view and engage in the world we live in today as followers of Jesus. This is the Word of God. It's not lost on me, the first three words. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The simple but subversive Jesus story helps to reorient our own lives and gives us clear direction on how to engage with compassion as we focus on doing what's right, especially so when somebody is being wronged. When a group of people are being wronged continually. When individuals of brown and black skin are being wronged daily, chronically. It's subversive because it upsets and even undermines the status quo. And we're all feeling a little bit of that. It goes against commonly held paradigms of engagement with others, unlike ourselves. It crushes stagnant, non-consequential religiosity and brings to the forefront the powerful ingredient of compassion. When we engage in acts of kindness across different languages, racial experiences, and ethnic realities. Now, scholars point to the initial action of the Samaritan of getting off the donkey as the catalyst for all that follows. Malcolm Irwin from New Zealand's Social Policy Unit describes it this way. The Samaritan had to get down from his donkey to get close to the man and had to stay off the donkey to position the man on it. A downward movement for the Samaritan and a redemptive boost for the half-dead man. As Major Marion would say what? It appears that the Samaritan's willingness to set aside his journey, to reach out to a half-dead man, violently attacked and lying on the side of a public street, without first dwelling on how the man got there, or if he deserved his assistance, is what sparks the redemptive miracle that we've shared from generation to generation and have held high as a standard of coming alongside with those crushed by life's circumstances. So the question to salvationists today is, are we willing to get off the donkey? Through the simple act of placing the injured man on the donkey and leading the donkey to a safe place, the Samaritan, by his actions, not his rhetoric, turned deeply held expectations of privilege upside down. We ask what we should be doing, what the plan of action is. The plan of action today for you and I is, to engage with compassion to the person that comes alongside you now. The cultural hatred that existed between the nations of the two main characters of Jesus' story, and the consequential and chronic injustices that had kept their nations and even themselves as strangers for far too long, were crushed in a single authentic expression of compassion. Are you courageous enough to step out with this kind of compassion today? The conventional image of who is our neighbor is being stretched, if not shattered once again in these days, not just by what is happening around us, but more importantly by the Spirit of the living God. Again, I quote Malcolm Irwin, "The parable of the Good Samaritan is a timeless and timely reminder of how life-giving change only comes from a countering embrace of the other. From within a change in power relations, from coalitions with the edges, from connecting the dots of our little and seemingly insignificant conversations with the concerns and struggles of others." Now, perceiving the world through God's eyes and sensing the moment with His authentic and all-encompassing compassion is a critical step towards learning and assimilating just how others experience life and death circumstances. Now, with dismay and sorrow, I've noticed that for whatever reason, amid a racial injustice pandemic, some have been sidetracked from moving forward in a Good Samaritan sort of way by ideas and concepts and even theories that seem to minimize the pain, the dissolution, the frustration, the anger, the fear, the isolation experienced by many of our black and brown brothers and sisters, both outside and inside the church walls. Now, it's so easy for us to stand apart from others and pass judgment concerning the situations that affect their everyday lives. So easy to offer advice on how our brown and black brothers and sisters should react to daily, chronic, systemic violence against loved ones because of the color of their skin, or how to assimilate what is happening to them and around them, or what they need to do when we haven't walked in the shoes of the other. When one has felt the pain, when one has suffered the loss, when one has endured the crushing blows, has lived in a space in which lament has come to be a part and parcel of life, it's altogether different, isn't it? Now, all of us can't possibly experience everything that the other is experiencing in life. But as Christian salvationists, we are called as soldiers of the cross to come off the donkey and to come alongside in the love of Jesus. As I've mentioned on previous occasions, the more significant concern is remaining stagnant and silent and not recognizing, acknowledging, and confronting the devastating realities that we can see in the eyes and hear in the voices and perceive in the broken spirit of our brothers and sisters of color who are an integral part of our family, as well as in the lives of those we serve. I, for one, do not believe I have the right to question the legitimacy of the deep hurt and pain in the hearts and minds of those who continue to suffer injustice, invisibility, misunderstandings, judgments, and a genuine lack of significance. We can't step away from God's call to be agents of conciliation as we encounter the sinful dividing walls that keep us from loving God and, yes, our neighbors as ourselves. Now, the power of compassion is its unrelenting inclusiveness. For God so loved the world. God's love invites us to not only know what pleases Him, but what hurts Him, in order to avoid those behaviors that reflect negatively on the Jesus we claim to follow. So as followers of Jesus, our compassion for others reflects His compassion for us. Jesus desires to reach out to the hurting and broken image bearers through those who follow Him. The battle cry for the army of compassion is to share and manifest Christ's compassion in the midst of the struggle. Are you willing to step into the struggle? Interestingly and timely enough, the parable of the Good Samaritan imagery is deeply embedded within the history of the Salvation Army. Listen to this. William Booth called Salvationists' early engagement with the unjustly treated by society a sacrament of the Good Samaritan. Would you be willing to take on the sacrament of the Good Samaritan for yourself? What are we waiting for? What needs to happen before I decide whether I step into the fray? What agenda items need to be listed out before I decide whether I jump in? What kinds of goals and measures do we want to need to be presented with before we get off the donkey and act with compassion? Let us together lean into the fact that grace flowed through the life-giving approach of the Samaritan in Jesus' story. And in so doing, it demonstrated with divine clarity His concept of neighbor and our part as His followers in His life, transforming desire for the whole world, our world. And in these days, especially so, the world of our brown and black brothers and sisters. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So, as Jesus points out, let us go and do likewise.
Salvationists and friends, there is no vaccine for racism. We must do the hard work. We can do better, and we are doing better as shoulder to shoulder we stand. As we come to the close of our Central Territorial Racial Justice Summit, we want to unite in a concluding litany written by Fran Pratt. This litany is for white individuals and congregations who want to pray into this deep-rooted system of injustice and posture themselves to work for the liberation and restoration of our siblings.
Please join
It
us.
is also for those who want to uncover racism where it lies hidden in our own hearts.
Please join us in prayer. Oh God, we are gradually waking up,
To the knowledge of our deep and hidden sins,
most particularly to the sin of racism,
which has affected our culture, our psyche, and practice.
We thought we could say, oh, those racist generations have passed on. The civil rights movement has already happened.
We thought we had leveled the playing field.
We thought we could ignore whiteness.
We thought we didn't have to see color.
But we know that we have more work to do.
To cleanse and heal and establish justice.
We quit before the work was finished.
We were wrong.
Help us to see what we couldn't see before.
Help us to examine everything,
Every custom, every system,
every group dynamic and assumption,
to leave no stone unturned in our mission,
to rout out injustice
to take every thought captive.
to the loving ethic of Christ.
This work is messy.
We feel sensitive about it,
We feel overwhelmed and ashamed,
but God, help us not to minimize or shirk,
nor capitulate to our fragile egos.
nor be blinded by our privilege,
Give us robust hearts,
willing to take an unflinching look at the racism within us.
and as we sift through our habits, our culture, and our customs,
Examining them with a new sensitivity to injustice,
help us to embody hope,
peacemaking,
restoration,
and above all,
love
for our neighbors.
Make us aligned to the community of heaven.
diligently working for liberation.
Amen.
Amen. May God bless you.